Do you want to know what project management skills you need to really be successful at your project and really improve yourself for the upcoming year? Well, I got you covered in this video. Emotional intelligence is going to be one of the top project management skills you are going to have to start looking at if you haven't already. Now, what exactly is emotional intelligence? It is self-awareness to your own internal feelings and knowing how those feelings are playing out in external situations. But it's also not just about yourself. It's about, can you also pick up on the cues of other people's internal feelings? So let me explain this a little more in depth. So think of it this way. Your emotional intelligence is you being able to pick up on emotional cues that don't necessarily correlate with verbal cues. So let me give you a specific answer or example. If you are in a meeting room in person and you walk in and you can just sense that there's something off here, or you can feel someone has, like we call it, like negative energy, or there's just something off, and you can see, even though their body language is saying one thing, they may be giving off a different vibe. And so that whole internal perception of how are you feeling and how are you projecting that self-awareness is going to be extremely critical for a skill set moving forward in project management and professionally, generally speaking. Why is that? Well, when we think about where we're heading professionally, there's constant competition with the artificial intelligence coming on board and really moving things a lot quicker than normally. We're expected to get things done quickly, bring people along the ride, and ensure that they're being executed really in a lot more quicker fashion, because we have all these tools and techniques now to help us propel us forward, really to produce. Now, when that happens, what will impede that expectation is the emotional intelligence, or the lack of emotional intelligence. Because what will happen is we'll rub people the wrong way because we're not understanding how we're doing and how we're actually impacting other people. So think of it along this lines as well. It could also be a scenario with, again, another example is you come across someone who is just, your boss comes in and starts yelling at you for whatever reason. We are not too sure why that's happening, but there's something occurring in the background, obviously, for that person to be doing that, but they're not emotionally aware to even pick up on the fact that they have that perspective coming to the table and they're projecting. So again, emotional intelligence, extremely important. Start becoming aware of it. The biggest thing you can do to get really good at reading other people in regards to emotional intelligence is get good for yourself. You need to be self-aware. You need to do that inner work. You need to figure out, how are you behaving, and is it something else that you're dealing with internally that's making you behave a certain way externally, and how is that being perceived by others? What type of emotional energy are you putting out there in the environment? So that self-awareness is the first step to really get good at emotional intelligence. And when you get really good with that, you then translate that into being able to understand other people's emotional intelligence as well, and where they're at. And then the two together, it's very powerful. Before we go on to the next tip, I want you to consider getting this. I created it specifically for you based on my years of experience, and it's only going to make your project successful. How do you get this? Well, the link is underneath this video. Go check it out. Another skill set you're going to want to develop is critical analysis. Now, this is really interesting because I think in the past, projects have been very tactical. We have allowed individuals who are subject matter expert to do the analysis and come to the table with their expert opinion. And normally we're like, okay, yeah, sure, that sounds great. But this is really interesting. I think there's another sort of wrench that being thrown into this critical analysis. As important as that skill set is, it's even going to be more important as we move in the future. Now, why do I say that? It's kind of like the first tip that I talked about. I brought about artificial intelligence and the push artificial intelligence does for us to get things done faster and quicker. Well, part of that as well when it comes to artificial intelligence is the information that it provides. I've been speaking to some of my clients and we've been talking about how there are individuals, and it's not a bad thing to use artificial intelligence. What we're finding in conversation is that people who are using artificial intelligence on projects are not necessarily checking the data. Now, this becomes really important, and why critical analysis as a project manager is even now more so, is when things come to the table, you have to ask, where'd you get that information? Did you use artificial intelligence? Why? Because people aren't checking their work, and you can see it when they're not checking their work. And why is this even important? Because you have to realize, where does artificial intelligence get its information? In the perfect world, artificial intelligence would be within the organization, which has clean data, and they pull out the information needed and boom, it's the right thing. That is not going to happen for a long time, because that you have to compile that information in order to have artificial intelligence pull it out. So right now, with the tools and techniques that we're using, it's really an open source internet data that is pulling that information. And if you look at it strategically, internet data, some of it is great, some of it's good, some of it is junk. So you now have to sift through it. And if you have inexperienced individuals on your project using artificial intelligence to get guidance, that's okay, nothing wrong with that, but they have to check it. Or you may need to do, as a project manager, more critical analysis around it. Now, interestingly enough, I'm not against it. I'm not against artificial intelligence. I'm just saying you have to do the analysis around it. In fact, with my project management program, Slay Project Management Pro, I've actually created an artificial intelligence project tool to help new people and even experienced people with baselining their project documentation. But again, it's open source. So what I always close it off with is, once you get that baseline, and I stress baseline, you need to check it with subject matter experts. Because again, it is a tool that is extremely helpful, but you have to validate that work through critical analysis. Creative problem solving is the next major skill set you're really going to want to develop. Now, why is this really important? Because let's be honest, projects, when you first get all the marching orders, they're concepts. Some of it may have been somewhat vetted, but until you start executing on the tasks, things start to pop up, and then you're like, oh darn, can we even do what we meant to do, like we're engaged to do, like our deliverable? You may have to do some brainstorming activities. This is where you need to be creative in figuring out solutions, because a lot of times on projects, what I see is, when we come across a problem, there's usually like, oh, put more money towards it, or get a software, just get a software to deal with the issue. It's not addressing the root cause. And maybe this is my Lean Six Sigma Master Black Belt training that, I think like this. I'm like, look, money is not the answer to solving problems. It's usually through creative brainstorming solutions that the best ideas you can come up with to really solve the problem, to move things forward. Not only that, it can help the organization, because listen, not everybody has an open purse strings that everything that you do is going to, and buy, is going to solve the problem. In fact, that kind of sometimes creates more problems. So we have to take a step back and take a look. How do we truly solve this in a creative way? Because you are going to come across things in your projects all the time. Now, having one person just solve a problem, if they're a subject matter expert and it's very specific to a thing that they're maybe coding or something else that they're doing that is based on their expertise, yeah, that's fine. Have the one person solve it. But I promise you this, more heads are better than one. And I'm always surprised, well, maybe not surprised, I'm always pleasantly pleased when we get a group of people together and we start building off of each other's ideas. Because sometimes it's the idea you're not even thinking about, you would never bring to the table, but someone else does, and you build off of those ideas and you get the perfect solution, which is just great. It actually makes it to be really worthwhile from a working perspective, because you're coming up with these new ideas, solving problems that is within the framework and allows you to move forward on your project. So that is something that I recommend that you build off of. Now, I have you covered. If you go to the YouTube search bar and put in Adriana Girdler brainstorming, there'll be some videos on how you can brainstorm really well in your projects. Before we get to the rest of the tips, I want to let you know that not only do I have this great free content here on YouTube, I have this. If you want to go to the next step with me and you want to learn more at a premium level, you can enroll in Slay Project Management. It's the exact process I use for all my clients, including all the tools you'll need. I've put the link in the description box below. Strategic execution is something else you definitely need to consider for your skill sets to develop. So think of it along this line. Strategic execution is ensuring that you have really solid planning behind you. So when you have really good solid planning behind you, now what I mean by that too, you don't have to have like a locked down plan where it's 100%, because having 100% everything, because you got to be open to things coming up, issues, the brainstorming, creative solutions, all of that stuff. But you really need to have a good foundation, a baseline as to what it is that you're doing to move forward. So again, no matter the methodology you use to execute your strategic initiative, is really planning it out well, really having a solid scope statement that's been approved by all the senior executive, that's aligned with the strategy and vision within the organization, so it makes sense that this is why you're doing the project. It also helps promote your project to make sure you have the right buy-in and support if things kind of fall off the rail. You have the executive support because it's tied into strategy. Again, that's the strategic thought process. And you being able to take a step back and being able to take a look at all those moving parts and being able to place what you're doing in the project and shifting things accordingly because of the overall strategy. So having a strategic mindset is not just about executing on a task. It's about taking a step back. How is everything connected? You may have to shift things around a bit just to make sure that it all works, but you're doing it within your framework that you've created, that standard way of working, which is going to be really important moving forward, really with as things are progressing in this professional world that we live in, and the quickness, strategy is going to be really key too. The last skill set I want you to really consider is team motivation. Now, of course you want your team to be motivated, but interestingly enough, when we get so caught up in our activities, we sometimes forget about motivating our team and moving forward as a skill set. When you take into account the critical analysis and the creative thinking and ensuring that your strategic mindset, you can't do any of that stuff unless you have a really good, connected, well-motivated team. And so part of that motivation is to be connected with your team, set them up for success, communicate well with them. That in itself can have a huge impact on how well the project is moving forward. It can also, if that's not done well, it can create a lot of issues and you're firefighting a lot. So as a skill set, motivating your team, keeping them connected, getting them bought into what you're doing, and you do that through your documentation, ensuring that they're part of the process, the decision making, ensuring that they are part of the action planning as well, and they take responsibility and accountability for the tasks that they are now assigned. So that becomes really important, really a really huge skill set to move you forward, because otherwise you're chasing people, and when you chase people, you're not as important to what they need to do when you're chasing people. You want people to be feeding information into you, and you want to be able to overlook it, kind of oversee it overall, which is really, really important. It's a big skill set because you may be doing multiple projects at the same time, right? So it really becomes critical, how are your skill sets to have information come to you and that you're being able to give the right information out to people. So it's this two-way street, which is going to be really important. And team motivation is a part of that. You have to, without your team, you're not going to be successful and you're not going to be able to execute on what you need to do. So that's a really critical skill set. Now that you know all the important skill sets that you have to be aware of as a project manager for now and moving forward, guess what? Right here, remember I told you to grab it from the link below, just a friendly reminder to do it. It has a lot of good tips that you're really going to want to take a look at. Make sure you watch this next video on how to have a high-performing team. On that note, if you could give this video a thumbs up if you resonated with the content, if you're going to use any of it, give some comments below, subscribe to this amazing community. I'd love to have you join us. I'll talk to you soon. Until the next video.